Part 2, Karma. My son's ex-girlfriend exploited his pain to get scholarships and make money. As shared in the previous part, my son's ex-girlfriend exploited Jake's pain to gain sympathy scholarships and money, while she was the very one who destroyed him from the inside out. Here's the update. The confrontation at the grocery store wasn't planned. It just happened. Sarah was shopping with her mother when we found ourselves in the same aisle. I stepped aside to let them pass, polite as ever. That's when Sarah made a careless comment, something about needing Jake gone so she could be with Trevor. Her mother gasped. Sarah tried to backpedal immediately, but I had already hit record on my phone. The audio was clear. From there, things began to unravel. More and more people started coming forward. Teachers who once dismissed things as teenage drama now recalled moments that stood out. Parents remembered strange comments their sons had made about Sarah that didn't seem important at the time. But together, the pattern became unmistakable. Sarah targeted insecure boys. She would gain their trust, then slowly break them down. She kept items from each one, trophies, souvenirs of their destruction. As neighbors shared concerns, Sarah's parents began pulling back. Mrs. Thompson stopped defending her daughter after multiple families brought her evidence. Mr. Thompson was seen arguing with Sarah in their driveway after David Chen's parents finally confronted them. Around the community, people started to connect the dots. Sarah's manipulations weren't limited to Jake. She had left a trail of damaged boys in every group she joined: yearbook committee, drama club, student council. Every activity was a new opportunity to find her next target. That's when a group of parents came together and quietly built a network. We created a discreet warning system. When Sarah showed interest in someone new, we'd alert each other. It wasn't about revenge. It was about keeping boys safe. Trevor started to unravel. He'd gotten into the relationship for the social boost, but he didn't expect how vicious Sarah could be. When he overheard her joking about Jake's hoodie being her victory prize, something in him shifted. He recorded her saying it, but didn't know what to do with it yet. Other parents who had once believed Sarah's grieving girlfriend act began apologizing to me. They started noticing things they'd missed before: the way she smiled while mentioning Jake's death, how she would guide conversations to get sympathy. Her grief was calculated. Her world began shrinking. Questions started popping up about the memorial fund she'd created. College admissions officers were asking about the timeline of events. Her narrative was falling apart. Scholarships that once looked like sure things were slipping away. Then came a revelation from Jake's freshman year. Another boy whose family had stayed silent until now had attempted to take his life after months of psychological torment from Sarah. She had kept his shoes as decor in her room, calling them vintage. The family had photos of her wearing them in social media posts, smiling. Meanwhile, I worked to protect David Chen. His parents finally took it seriously when his sister showed them what I'd gathered. They pulled him from school and got him into therapy. David later told me that Sarah had been texting him nonstop 1 minute, flooding him with praise, the next criticizing his body. Jake's former teachers and coaches began to step up. They built a presentation for the school board about identifying signs of psychological abuse. Mrs. Thompson, the English teacher, said she'd noticed Jake's writing had grown darker, but hadn't made the connection. Coach Miller vowed to be more vigilant about team dynamics. Sarah's new narrative failed. She tried claiming she was being harassed for grieving differently. But the evidence was overwhelming. Her posts contradicted her words. The timeline with Trevor proved she'd planned Jake's humiliation well in advance. Mrs. Miller had hosted a sleepover and overheard something she couldn't forget. While bringing snacks to the girls, she caught Sarah laughing about upgrading from Jake to Trevor. The other girls looked uncomfortable, but laughed along anyway. No one wanted to become her next target. Mrs. Miller stood frozen in the hallway, finally seeing Sarah clearly for the first time. People in the community started seeing me differently too. I wasn't the angry, unhinged father anymore. They saw a parent fighting to protect other kids. I went to school board meetings. I shared everything I had. No threats, no outbursts, just truth. Alexandra finally broke her silence. She sent me screenshots of Sarah's college essay drafts. They were dated 2 weeks before Jake died. In them, Sarah wrote about losing someone to an eating disorder. She was crafting her victim's story before Jake even went to the lake. Jake's birthday was coming up. Sarah was planning another theatrical memorial, a candlelight vigil speeches about body positivity and toxic masculinity. The hypocrisy made me sick. She was about to profit again from the very pain she had caused. The community had begun to understand Sarah's true pattern. She thrived on breaking vulnerable boys down and then using their pain to elevate herself. It wasn't physical abuse. It was psychological warfare. That's when I realized this wasn't about destroying Sarah. It was about protecting the next kid like Jake. That would be his legacy, not revenge. Prevention. When Sarah tried to provoke me at a school event, I didn't react. She made a cruel comment about Jake's weakness, trying to bait me. I stayed calm. I recorded it. People around us saw it all. The coldness in her voice. The mask slipping. The school board quietly acknowledged there were real concerns. They didn't have the policy in place to act immediately, but they began discussions. Psychological bullying. Emotional manipulation. They knew something had to change. Families began comparing stories, and the stories were consistent. Overweight or awkward boys, targeted, elevated, destroyed, one after another. And when someone leaked a photo of Sarah surrounded by the belongings of her former victims, Jake's hoodie among them, the illusion shattered. The image spread online like wildfire. Sarah surrounded by the things she'd taken grinning, like a hunter showing off trophies. The fundraiser venue pulled out. Public support for Sarah collapsed. Then in desperation, she came to me. She offered to return Jake's hoodie if I stopped exposing her. She tried to fake remorse, but her eyes were the same. Cold, detached. I recorded the entire conversation. In it, she admitted she never felt bad about Jake's death, only frustrated at having to keep up the grief performance. The evidence kept piling up, and so did the people willing to speak. More people came forward. Former victims found the courage to speak. Parents shared stories they had hidden out of shame. Teachers started to recognize incidents they once thought were isolated for what they really were, a calculated pattern. Sarah had spent years targeting vulnerable boys. She earned their trust, slowly eroded their self-worth, and discarded them once she'd squeezed every drop of validation from their pain. She kept pieces of them, items they wore, gifts they gave, as trophies. Her behavior wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. Her power had always come from secrecy, from the disbelief that a teenage girl could be so cold, so strategic. But the truth was now out in the open. Her mask had slipped, and she couldn't hide in plain sight anymore. As her college application deadlines neared, the urgency increased. Sarah had built her narrative perfectly, the grieving girlfriend, who had lost her first love to toxic masculinity and body image issues. She'd won regional writing contests. Her essays moved readers. They just didn't know the truth behind them. That Thursday morning, I got a call from the school. They asked me to attend a meeting about the memorial fundraiser Sarah had planned. In the conference room sat Principal Henderson, 2 school board members, and the district's legal advisor. They said they'd received several complaints about the fundraiser's legitimacy. People were questioning where the money was going. They didn't have the authority to cancel it yet, but they were watching closely. Meanwhile, Sarah went all in on the performance. She recruited the drama club for lighting and staging, got the choir to sing, even arranged local media coverage. Her social media became a curated grief machine full of black and white photos, melancholy captions, and carefully chosen angles. She cropped out the parts that showed her disgust for Jake. She knew how to sell sadness. David Chen's situation worsened. His sister sent me a photo. David at 3:00 a.m., running stairs at the high school stadium. He had lost 45 pounds in 6 weeks. When his parents finally confronted Sarah, she put on the perfect show of concern. But behind the scenes, she was still texting David things like, "Try harder," and "Why don't you look like this yet?" accompanied by photos of shirtless fitness models. Then, an unexpected breakthrough. Trevor's younger brother had been reviewing old basketball footage to make highlight reels. In one clip, he found something buried in the background, clear audio of Sarah giving Trevor detailed instructions on how to humiliate Jake. What to say, when to say it, and even who should record it. The boy brought it to his parents, shaken. Mrs. Miller called me immediately. She'd confronted Trevor, who finally broke down. He admitted Sarah had threatened to ruin him if he didn't follow through. She had screenshots of him cheating on tests, photos from parties' insurance to keep him obedient. We gathered the families in our parent network. We reviewed what we had. 7 boys, 7 stories. All the same pattern. Sarah would find a boy who was overweight, shy, or socially awkward. She would make him feel chosen, then slowly unravel him. It always ended the same way, with a public humiliation, a broken kid, and something of his in her possession. 2 days before the memorial, Alexandra made her move. She sent me everything. Screenshots of messages dating back years. Sarah bragging about what she'd done. Detailed psychological strategies, even a ranking system for the boys she'd targeted. Jake was listed as best one yet. Sarah must have sensed the end coming. She showed up at my house. David Chen sat in the passenger seat of her car waiting. She offered me a deal. If I stopped spreading lies, she would return Jake's hoodie and cancel the fundraiser. I refused. That's when her true face showed. She laughed. Not out of discomfort, but real cruel laughter. She told me how easy Jake had been to break, how pathetic he looked begging for her approval. I recorded every word. The next morning, David collapsed on his run. His heart wouldn't stabilize. Doctors discovered he'd been mixing dangerous supplements, pre-workouts, diet pills, trying to lose weight fast. From his hospital bed, he told his parents everything. Sarah had been sending him comparison photos, telling him he wasn't trying hard enough. That was the final crack. Trevor came clean to the school board. He explained everything: how Sarah would isolate her targets, collect ammunition against them, and use emotional pressure to destroy them. He admitted what he'd done, and how she'd controlled him. He told them about the recordings, and about the box. Sarah kept her trophies under her bed. Items from each boy: hoodies, class rings, watches, jerseys, each one labeled with a date and a cruel nickname. Jake's was at the top. Practice boy, best one yet. The Millers and I met with the school administration again. This time we brought everything: audio, screenshots, written statements. The principal went pale as he watched and listened. It wasn't an emotional plea. It was undeniable evidence. Sarah's parents were called to the school. I watched through the window as they reviewed what we'd collected. Mrs. Thompson fell apart when she read Sarah's messages about Jake. Mr. Thompson walked out when they played the clip of her laughing about his death. They finally saw what they'd enabled. That afternoon, the school canceled the memorial fundraiser. Officially, they blamed logistical issues. Unofficially, everyone knew why. Sarah scrambled to recover. She posted stories claiming she was being bullied for grieving differently. But it was too late. Alexandra started sharing screenshots. Other victims stepped up. The truth spread, faster than she could control. In a final attempt to manipulate the narrative, Sarah posted a video saying the backlash had pushed her to the brink, that she was considering self-harm, but the community had seen too much. Mental health professionals stepped in to ensure she was safe, but no one bought the act anymore. The school board called an emergency meeting. They implemented new policies: mandatory reporting for emotional abuse, better psychological training for teachers. They didn't name the initiative after Jake, but everyone knew who it was for. Then college admission season arrived. Sarah's essay, her masterpiece of manipulation, started falling apart. Schools asked questions, scholarships disappeared. Her carefully curated future dissolved. Trevor testified again publicly this time. He described how Sarah found her targets, isolated them, and stripped them down emotionally. He admitted what he'd allowed and urged others to speak up. His bravery gave others permission. Later, Sarah's parents searched her room. They found everything, the trophies, each labeled, each item carrying a scar from someone else's pain. Jake's hoodie was returned to me clean and carefully folded. With it came a letter of apology. I held it in my hands for a long time, remembering Jake's smile when he first bought it. The ketchup stain from our last burger together was gone, but the memory lingered. On what would have been his 18th birthday, we held our own memorial. No drama, no performance, just honesty. Victims of Sarah's abuse stood together. David spoke about recovery. Trevor apologized again. Others shared their stories. Jake's legacy lived in their strength. I set up a scholarship fund in Jake's name for students who've been emotionally abused. The first recipient was a boy who had survived a similar ordeal. He bore the scars, but he was still here. The fund would help him keep going. One day, I got a letter from Sarah through her therapy program. A formal apology, coached, polished. She mentioned how Jake's death had hurt her college chances. Even in her remorse, she made it about herself. Our parent network kept meeting. We turned what started as grief into protection, into change. Jake's story became a shield for others. His death didn't just reveal a predator, it sparked something bigger. We buried the hoodie with Jake, not as a symbol of what Sarah took, but as a reminder of who Jake really was. A boy who deserved love without needing to change. A boy whose worth was never up for debate. Over the next few months, change rippled outward. Teachers grew more aware. Parents more involved. Students learned to recognize emotional manipulation. The world that once let Sarah thrive began shifting into one where kids like Jake could be safe. I still visit Jake's room sometimes. It's the same. His basketball sits in the corner, his textbook still on the desk. A quiet space for a boy who used to believe he wasn't enough. Kevin, the boy from Sarah's past, came back to speak at Jake's memorial. He'd survived his own torment. He'd moved on, but carried the same scars. His presence reminded everyone Jake wasn't her first victim, just her final, most complete one. Sarah is in treatment now. Her parents fund prevention programs in schools. They understand their part in what happened. The hoodie is buried. The stain is gone. But the lesson remains. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like popular girls with sad smiles and perfect alibis. But truth once spoken spreads, and once seen they lose their power. Jake's death wasn't just a tragedy. It became a turning point. In David's recovery, in Trevor's redemption, in school policy, in every parent who now knows what to watch for. Jake thought he wasn't enough, but his story proved he was everything. A warning, a light, a shield. And even in grief, that's something. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.